This video series outlines the various pedagogies adopted in the instructional management by parents, community and teachers, or impact learning system, and how they may be used to support remote learning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and other emergency situations. This series includes peer group learning and program teaching, among others. Another impact instructional strategy that can be applied for alternative learning delivery during emergencies is individual study, also known as individual pursuit. In a standard impact setup, learners who are ready for independent learning are given time during regular class sessions to study on their own. A class period for individual study may be used by fast learners or those capable of independent learning to do further study by going to the library or the Learning Resource Center, computer laboratory, or other learning spaces for enhanced learning. In schools that fully implement the complete impact learning system, individual study is mostly allotted for peer group and pupil leaders who are already independent learners. The individual study aligns with the impact principle of recognizing individual differences such as learning styles, speed or pace, individual abilities, interests, and culture, among others. Who is an independent learner? An independent learner is one who takes responsibility for his or her own learning. He is self-motivated, learning on his own, takes initiative for learning, is always curious, and actively engages the learning materials. Individual study requires independent reading, providing learners with the opportunity to practice the decoding and comprehension skills learned during class on self-learning modules or other self-selected materials. Independent reading not only provides additional practice time for learners, but it also fosters independence. In addition, independent reading provides the opportunity for learners to dive into a book with their heart. Daily opportunities for independent practice reinforce learning, build independence, and foster a love for reading. Individual pursuit also frees up the teacher's time, allowing them to focus or give more attention to struggling learners who need remediation or one-on-one tutoring, enabling these learners to catch up with the other group members. Independent learners are engaged in individual learning in the library, computer laboratory, or other learning spaces. The teacher or learning facilitator stays in the classroom, available to provide customized learning support and instruction to learners needing additional assistance to address specific learning gaps. Bearing in mind that face-to-face sessions during times of emergency can only be held if permitted. They must always adhere to authorized health and safety practices. The teacher or learning facilitator identifies learners who are capable of independent learning. This may be done using the PHIL IRI results and on the teacher's recommendation. These are mainly suited for learners in grades 4 to 6, who generally have a higher level of reading ability and maturity. These learners are usually tapped as peer group leaders and program teachers. Having identified independent learners, the teacher needs to plan an individual study program or the individual weekly home learning plan for these learners. The individual study program can best be laid down through an individual learning contract or weekly home learning plan, which documents specific learning goals and tasks that an independent learner would commit to do. This learning contract should be agreed on and signed by the teacher, the parent, and the learner. It may also include additional instructions to the learners as they complete the learning tasks. Notes to the parents and/or learning support aids such as teaching notes or supplies and materials are also needed for the assigned tasks. With the guidance of the teacher or learning facilitator, the individual study plans are drawn indicating the learning area, topic, expected output, the self-learning modules to be covered, and schedules of individual consultations, as well as the submission of outputs. These are aligned with DepEd's Most Essential Learning Competencies, or MELCS. The parents are likewise tasked to monitor the progress of their child or children's learning through the individual monitoring plan provided by the teacher. This should be explained in detail to the parents. Here are some suggested tasks that the learners can undertake under their individual study program. Writing a book or movie review that may be connected to the lessons completed. Preparing an investigative report on a social issue or concern. Preparing information, education, and communication materials such as posters, infographics, etc. on an assigned topic. Preparing an article for the school newspaper or website. Conduct research on a topic of interest. Do advanced study of the peer group learning modules. Volunteer as a tutor to group members. Present a performance such as music, dance, drama, poem. Complete self-learning modules and/or learning activity sheets. More suggestions on assessment tools, integrative performance tasks, and rubrics are available on DepEd Order Number 31, Series of 2021, Interim Policy Guidelines for Assessment and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. During the class period allocated for individual pursuits, the teacher may schedule a presentation of the learner's output to the class as part of the performance evaluation in addition to rating the output submitted. The student's outputs, assignments, or projects are submitted to the teacher following an agreed schedule. The individual study plan or weekly home learning plan should be monitored, reviewed, enhanced, and revised for each week, or as deemed necessary by the teacher. For grades 1 to 3 and other learners who are not yet ready for independent learning, the individual study period can be devoted to tutoring, remediation, or basic skills practice. The teacher or learning facilitator sets a schedule for tutoring or remediation. A parent, caregiver, family member, learning support aide, or a community member may be invited to assist the teacher as volunteer tutor. They shall also be oriented and guided by the individual weekly home learning plan. Instructional materials are prepared by the teacher or learning facilitator for use by the volunteer tutors. Individual study in an online mode can augment peer group learning for grades 4 to 6 learners and for tutoring or remediation among learners in grades 1 to 3 who would need such intervention. In implementing individual study online, the teacher or learning facilitator identifies who among the learners, usually in grades 4 to 6, are independent learners and who have access to the internet and other devices. The teacher or learning facilitator meets with the learners by grade level through an online meeting using a preferred video conferencing platform to discuss their individual study plan or weekly home learning plan. Teachers should also make it clear to the learners that individual study is one of the bases for grading and that their learning outputs will be evaluated. Following the meeting, the teachers will have to prepare the individual study or weekly home learning plan. This may include the self-learning modules to be completed and online learning resources or sites that may be accessed to complete the assigned learning tasks. A schedule for regular one-on-one online consultations and classes or tutoring should also be developed by the teacher or facilitator to check on the progress of the learners. This may be scheduled or may be done as needed or deemed necessary. Online teacher-parent meetings may be scheduled to discuss and monitor the progress of learners and to identify other learning needs. On the basis of the feedback on the learner's progress, further agreement on new learning tasks can also be developed during online interactions. Parents or guardians are encouraged to learn how to use new technology and to develop digital skills in order to effectively support their children, especially the younger ones, in using digital learning devices and responsibly navigating ICT and online resources. For the presentation of outputs, learners may present their pre-recorded video of their output, with the explanation on how they have accomplished the learning tasks such as science experiments, Edukasyong Pangtahanan at Pangkabuhayan or EPP, Technology and Livelihood Education or TLE, or Technology and Livelihood or TVL performance tasks. These presentations may also be oral tasks in using the mother tongue, Filipino or English. As an alternative, these may also be performed in real time with a teacher. An online schedule of the presentation of outputs shall be scheduled and documented in the weekly home learning plan. In the offline mode for remote learning, the teacher would also orient, plan, and discuss the individual study plans or weekly home learning plans with the parents, learning facilitator, or learning support aide to better help learners on the remote learning setup. On setting an agreement on the individual study plan, a schedule for each week is given through which the learner will have to devote time for completing the individual study plan while studying at home. Templates, guidelines, and instructions should be provided to the learners on preparing their outputs, assignments, and the presentation of outputs. These may be in the form of filled-out learning activity sheets, home learning tasks, or portfolios for submission to the teachers. Parents may also be tapped to do the submission of the learners' outputs, assignments, or projects during the scheduled pickup of the self-learning modules. Students' outputs, assignments, or projects are submitted regularly to the teacher to be included in the grading for the quarter. The teacher or learning facilitator should monitor offline learners on the progress in the individual study plans using the individual monitoring plan. This can be done through text messaging or home visitation, while mindful that the health and safety protocols are strictly followed. Online learning sessions may be arranged in a blended format to support independent learners. Online sessions with the learners in grades 4 to 6 who are classified as independent learners by the teacher will need to be organized to focus on their individual study plans for enrichment, remediation, and presentation of outputs. Templates and guidelines for the learners to use as models or guides in preparing for the presentation of their outputs should be provided by the teacher. Teachers must ensure that the means for monitoring the learner's progress is established to make certain that learners are on track and that learning is actually taking place. Further, teachers must ensure that instructional support is available when needed. This may be done face-to-face through home visitation. Online monitoring can be done through the use of social media and other conferencing apps that may be available and accessible to the learners and parents. This should be clearly shown in the study plan or weekly home learning plan. Independent study can be done by secondary level learners who are already independent and can manage their own learning with little or no supervision. An individual study plan as used in grades 4 to 6 can be prepared and agreed on by both the learner and teacher. For secondary level learners, what is most important is to ensure that learners are able to complete their individual study plans on top of what are required of them in their regular learning activities and assignments in class. Even under the individual study, the impact principles still apply. In the first impact principle, education is a shared responsibility among teachers, pupils, parents, or caregivers, and community members. This principle is evident as parents continue to provide support and monitor the progress of their children in completing their individual study plans. The principle that education is a process of developing socio-emotional and leadership skills is also evident in the individual study plan, as learners take responsibility in crafting their own individual study plan in collaboration with a teacher, reflecting progress towards the completion of expected or assigned learning tasks, and in presenting their output in a venue and method agreed upon by both teachers and learners. This helps build their skills in self-regulation, self-direction, and self-discipline. When learners have the opportunity to present their work, it further boosts their self-esteem and allows them to enjoy accomplishment, giving them the motivation to go on to more difficult levels of the individual study plans. Individual study is anchored on the third principle of impact that states, learning can take place anywhere, anytime, and anyhow. The individual study plans allow learners to decide when and how they will work on the activities in the plan based on an agreed schedule. Thus, it gives them the leverage to learn anywhere, anytime, and anyhow within the parameters of defined time frame and output. Individual study also demonstrates the fourth principle, that all school-aged children should have equal access to inclusive quality education. In crafting the individual study plans, both the teacher and the learner agree on the topic or learning area to work on. Learners are encouraged to be creative, innovative, and explorative as they work on their outputs. With the guidance of their teachers, quality outputs may be achieved, which are indicative of quality education. Allowing learners to continue working on their individual study plans is one way by which DepEd is committed to honor its mandate of providing quality education to all learners, despite the challenges posed by the pandemic and other emergencies. Individual study operationalizes DepEd's pledge that even in the face of disruption caused by emergencies, education must continue. The fifth principle emphasizes that a child-centered education uses contextualized learning materials aligned with 21st century curriculum. With the challenge of providing quality education during the pandemic, DepEd had to prioritize the MELCS, a condensed version of the K-12 curriculum. Individual study plans are anchored on these MELCS, and teachers and facilitators make sure that materials used as references are aligned with 21st century curriculum requirements. The sixth principle states that a more meaningful learning is lifelong, life-wide, life-deep, and life-wise. The experiences learners gain as they do research, explore resources, and plan, prepare, and present their outputs help develop critical learning and enable them to learn skills such as self-discipline, time management, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. Such experiences help develop their self-confidence, positively impacting their lives and helping make them lifelong, life-wide, life-deep, and life-wise independent learners. The seventh principle promotes the paradigm that every teacher is a manager of the teaching-learning process. The role of teachers now has shifted from an agent for delivering educational content to a manager of the learning process. As a manager, the teacher sees to it that through independent learning, learners engage in tasks and gain access to learning materials that are active and engaging, that stimulate critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, and love of learning. The teacher monitors the learning process as learners undergo individual study sessions and motivates them to continue successful independent learning. A comprehensive guidebook that documents the different impact learning strategies, pedagogies, and resources, and how they may be used in the elementary schools for grades 1 to 6 was developed by INNOTECH. You may visit the INNOTECH website and download the Impact Guidebook for free. We wish you luck as you start on the Impact Individual Study journey as one of your remote teaching strategies for ensuring the continuous delivery of quality learning for all the learners under your care.